Hello friends, welcome to ESC Gate PSU short e-lecture. Today in this video we are going to discuss the remaining portion of the biodiversity and the conservation unit, that is the threat to the biodiversity and the method of conservation of biodiversity. Before moving on to the conservation of biodiversity, let us discuss what are the actual threats to the biodiversity against which we need to make an effort for the conservation of the biodiversity. So friends, the first threat to the biodiversity is the natural cause, that is uh, the destruction of the biodiversity because of the natural occurring phenomena, that is the forest fire, natural calamities like some of the storms, tsunami, landslide, avalanches, all that. Second is the anthropogenic causes. That is, anthropogenic causes means the man-made activity that are responsible for the destruction of the biodiversity. सो फ्रेंड्स, एंथ्रोपोजेनिक कॉजेज़ में आता है ओवर एक्सप्लॉयटेशन, जिसका मतलब ये है कि ह्यूमंस जो हैं वो अपनी नीड पूरी करने के लिए नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज को एक्सप्लॉइट कर रहे हैं, ना कि उन्हें एक सस्टेनेबल वे में यूज़ कर रहे हैं. सेकंड है पोल्यूशन एंड द थर्ड है illegal activities. Friends, illegal activities like hunting and poaching of the animals in order to sell their useful body parts, like the teeth of the elephant, like the horn of the one horned rhinoceros, all that. थर्ड है बायोटिक इंटरफ्रेंस, जिसमें आता है झूम कल्टीवेशन एंड एनक्रोचमेंट. फ्रेंड्स, झूम कल्टीवेशन एक ऐसी ट्रेडिशनल एग्रीकल्चरल प्रैक्टिस है जिसमें जो फार्मर्स होते हैं वो एक पर्टिकुलर फील्ड में, एग्रीकल्चरल फील्ड में कुछ सालों तक फार्मिंग प्रैक्टिसेस परफॉर्म करते हैं, एंड आफ्टर दैट दे यूज टू बर्न ऑल दैट एग्रीकल्चरल फील्ड एंड मूव ऑन टू सम अदर फील्ड. So there is a huge loss of biodiversity because of this traditional farming practices. And the fourth threat to the biodiversity is the indirect cause, that is the deforestation and the habitat destruction. Friends, because of the rapid urbanization, rapid industrialization, there is a huge loss of the forest that comes under the deforestation and the habitat destruction. Because of all that threats to the biodiversity, it is required to make a conservative effort towards the conservation of biodiversity. So here is the method of conservation of the biodiversity. That is, first is the in situ conservation, and the second is the ex situ conservation. So friends, the first method is the in situ conservation. This method refers to the conservation of the species in their own natural environment. For example, if it is required to conserve the polar bear, and if we are making an effort to conserve them in their natural environment, that is in the polar region, then this conservation practice will comes under the in situ method. So here are some example of the protected area that comes under the in situ conservation, that is the national park, wildlife sanctuary, biosphere reserve, tiger reserve, elephant reserve and the protected forest. सो फ्रेंड्स, बात करते हैं नेशनल पार्क की. तो नेशनल पार्क जो है ये एक प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया है जहाँ पर कंजर्वेशन प्रैक्टिसेस परफॉर्म की जाती है फॉर द फ्लोरा एंड फौना with a minimum human interference, means the human activity are strictly prohibited here. The activities like hunting, poaching, grazing and encroachment are strictly prohibited over here. And there are total 106 national park are there in the India. Actually, the national park, the concept of the national park was introduced by IUCN, that is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, in 1969. And it is important to note that the headquarter of IUCN is situated in Gland, that is in the Switzerland. In India, the oldest national park is the Haley National Park, that was constructed in 1936, and in nowadays it is called as the Jim Corbett National Park, that is in the state of Uttarakhand. And the largest national park in India is the Hemis National Park, that is situated in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Along with that, the smallest national park in India is the South Button Island National Park, that is situated in the Andaman and Nicobar Island. So moving on to the Biosphere Reserve. Actually, The concept of biosphere reserve in India was introduced by the UNESCO's Man and Biosphere program that was held at the 1971. Recently, in India, nowadays in India, there are total 18 biosphere reserves, of which the oldest is the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve that was constructed in the 1986, and the largest biosphere reserve is the Ran of Kutch that is situated in the state of Gujarat. Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve is situated in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve is situated in the border of the states, that is the Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and the Karnataka. And out of this 18 biosphere reserve in India, 10 of them are under the UNESCO's network of the biosphere reserve, and the remaining 8 are considered as a biosphere reserve only in India but not by the UNESCO. And biosphere biosphere reserve may have one or more national park or the wildlife sanctuary within it. And many of the ecological research programs and research practices are being promoted in the biosphere reserve. It promotes the research on the ecological conservation and the environmental preservation. So in this map we can see the various biosphere reserve across the India, and the name with underline, that is like this, are under the UNESCO network of the biosphere reserve. All that are Nanda Devi, Pachmadi, Achanak Marg, Simlipal, Sundarban, Nokrek, Nilgiri, Agasthamalai, Gulf of Mannar, and the Nicobar. All these are comes under the UNESCO network of the Biosphere Reserve, and the remaining like the Sheshachalam, Run of Kutch, Cold Desert, and the Kanchenjunga, Manas, the Hangdibang, and the last one is the Dibru Sakhowa. All these are not included in the UNESCO's Man and Biosphere Reserve list, but are considered as biosphere reserve in India. So let us talk about the various zones that are within the biosphere reserve. There are three area within a biosphere reserve, that is the transition area, buffer area, and core area, or it also called as a zone. Starting from the core zone, only monitoring happens here. No human activity are allowed. No educational and training activities are allowed over here. Only and only monitoring is done over here. Talking about the buffer zone, then in buffer zone tourism are allowed, and human settlement can also be allowed in this area. Along with that, research station and the educational and the training practices are promoted over here. And in the transition zone, tourism and research practices can be promoted over here, and human settlement are allowed in the transition area. So moving on to the wildlife sanctuary. A wildlife sanctuary is a protected area where conservation practices are performed, but along with that, some limited amount of human activities are also allowed over here, like grazing, firewood collection. All those limited activities are allowed to some extent in wildlife sanctuary. Inside a wildlife sanctuary, the hunting of the animal is completely prohibited, and the tree cannot be cut down for any kind of use, and especially the clearing of the forest for the agricultural purpose is strictly banned over here. A sanctuary can be upgraded to the national park, and the national park can't be degraded to a wildlife sanctuary. In India today, there are total 567 wildlife sanctuary are present, and the concept of wildlife sanctuary are introduced under the Wildlife Protection Act that came into action in 1972. So let us talk about the protected forest. These are the protected area in which the conservation practices are performed, and these are mentioned in the Indian Forest Act that came into action in 1927. And in the protected forest, some of the outside activities like grazing and etc. are allowed, but in some cases may not. And the reserve forest is also a protected area mentioned in the Indian Forest Act 1927. Uh, the major difference in between the protected forest and the reserve forest is that in the reserve forest, outside activity are generally not permitted, but in some cases they might be permitted to do so. But in the protected area, the outside practices are allowed, but in some cases they may not. So, talking about the tiger reserve, actually the tiger reserve is a kind of protected area that have is strictly assigned for the conservation of the tigers only. In India, total there are 50 tiger reserves present, and all the working and the monitoring of the tiger reserve are holded by a statutory body, that is NTCA, means the National Tiger Conservation Authority. And the Project Tiger was launched in 1973 in the Palamau Tiger Reserve, that is situated in the state of Jharkhand. Friends, this line is very much important. That is the launching year of the Tiger Reserve, and sorry, the Tiger Project Tiger, and the state in which the Palamau Tiger Reserve is situated. And Karnataka is the state with the maximum number of tiger. So that's all about the in situ conservation, and moving on to the ex situ conservation. In ex situ conservation, the conservation practices are performed in an artificial habitat, just like it happened in the botanical garden and the zoological park. So, in India, Botanical Garden was established in 1876 as the Royal Botanical Garden, and the Botanical Garden in Kolkata is the largest in the world and is famous for the great banyan tree. Zoological parks, also called a zoological garden or animal park, it is a facility in which animals are confined within a particular enclosure and are displayed to the public. And inside a zoological park, this animal may also be breeds. So friends, that's all about the biodiversity conservation. And if you like this video, then please do subscribe our YouTube channel, and you can also like our Facebook page. And friends, don't forget to give your feedback into the comment section.